Hello everyone, welcome to one of the highlights of Kimbali 2020, a Rebuild Bali Festival, a digital program that's designed to inspire, excite, reconnect and revitalise the Balinese and Indonesian community. Kimbali, which is the Indonesian word for return or come back, represents revitalisation in the face of global challenges. The festival will unite people in Bali and in Indonesia together with an international audience, time when travel is largely impossible and creating connections is more important than ever. My name's Richard Feidler. I'm an author and also the host of Conversations on ABC Radio in Australia. And it's my enormous pleasure to be hosting this conversation with David Byrne. David Byrne's been a compelling, creative person for just about all my adult life. Firstly, of course, as the co-founder of the New York band Talking Heads, and then as a solo artist and a collaborator with people like Brian Eno, St. Vincent, and many others. Most recently, David's collaborated with Spike Lee to produce American Utopia, a glorious and uplifting feature movie of his musical stage production of the same name, with David leading a troupe of musicians, all barefoot in grey suits, with their instruments strapped to their bodies so they can move around the stage with perfect freedom. The stage production and the movie have been received, well, rapturously by audiences and by critics who've acclaimed it as a kind of necessary tonic in a strange and distressing year. David's in New York, I'm in Sydney, and we're both doing this because we love and admire Bali and its blazing cultural traditions. Hello, David, welcome.
Hi, thank you. And I was reading the paper in bed this morning and read that Melbourne has had, I know you're in Sydney, but Melbourne has had 0 infections. And so they basically are beginning to completely open up again, which to us in New York, who are, and where things have been seriously bungled, we're both envious and kind of, and in some ways angry at our own situation that we can't be like Melbourne.
Yes, it's not been so bad here in Sydney, but in Melbourne it was catastrophic a few months ago. Now they're sort of coming out of their homes, blinking in the sunlight once more, looking at other human beings directly across a table. I think they're all having a lovely time, and thank you for your good wishes, David. On that matter. David, I did a fair bit of reading in preparation for this. I borrowed a copy of your wonderful book, How Music Works. And
that's a hefty book there.
Yes, that's right. It's the kind of book you can stun a burglar with, which means it's a good book, I think. I found online this wonderful old article and your feature on you from Spin magazine from 1985. And in this article, a very excited journalist said, I'm quoting him here, "David Byrne looks like he ate a lot of beef jerky for breakfast. If David Byrne's bags were searched at customs, it would probably be for military secrets, not drugs. He sings like a man whose hair is on fire." David, are any of those things true, I wonder?
Well, gee, I wish some of them were true. They're such good stories.
This is a festival for Bali. What do you remember of your first trip to Bali way back? I think it was the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in early 80s. It was transformative for me. I had been on a tour with Talking Heads, and I think the tour ended in Japan. I think I might have stayed on a little bit and taken in some Japanese theater, maybe some kabuki or no or bunraku or whatever. And then some friends from Japan said, well, we're going to Bali. Do you want to come? And of course, yes, I knew about gamelan and a little bit more than that, but I said, yes, of course. And when I was there, I rented a motorcycle, as people sometimes do, and would pretty much daily head up into the hills. And if during the day I saw people carrying offerings to kind of a temple ground, I would make a note of that and go, remember to come back there later. There's going to be something going on. And sure enough, there was. So that became my kind of routine. And so sometimes there would be a singing and maybe dancing. Sometimes there was the shadow puppet dramas. Lots of sometimes yes. Sometimes they're kind of what would you say? A kind of dance performance, ritual, kind of a little bit of all of the above. All very, very inspiring to me in lots and lots of different ways.
How did it affect the way you performed after you'd seen that kind of very stylized form of performance?
Well, I realized that oddly enough, I thought this kind of deeply embedded kind of performance, if you want to call it a performance, and kind of Asian theater, like what I saw in Japan, there was nothing naturalistic about it whatsoever. Miles away from traditional, say, Western theater, like, say, Shakespeare or something like that, or drawing room plays where they make a set that looks like somebody's house. There was nothing naturalistic about it. But in some ways, I thought that has more in common with what I do. So I started thinking of what I do as a musical performer who is on stage. I thought what I do is equally artificial, equally unnaturalistic, and maybe what I do is also a kind of theater, and I should start thinking, and I might start thinking of it in those terms. So that was kind of liberating for me.
How did you bring that Balinese idea of performance did you bring it into film clips like the film clip to Once in a Lifetime, which is so stylized?
I might have. I might have. I mean, I wasn't kind of directly lifting anything that I could think of, but I was kind of absorbing all that and a kind of general attitude towards what performance is, what a kind of the connection between an audience and the performer might be. I realized that, for example, when I went to the shadow puppet performances, they would go on for a very long time, and the audience would kind of come and go. This happened in kind of kabuki performances as well. The audience would kind of stay for a while, wander out, get a snack on the kind of the little vendors that were on the periphery, talk with some of their friends, and then come back in and watch some more and come and go. So the audience was kind of constantly in flux. And I thought that's really interesting. I would love to do a show that works like that, where you don't have to like sit quietly and pay rapt attention for the whole time. You're allowed to kind of come and go. It becomes this world that you enter, that you can leave, and then you can come back into it. And in this case, which is similar to kind of concerts and what I do, you know what the story is ahead of time. It's the same story that you've heard a million times, or that you've heard since childhood. In my case, it's the same song. You know the songs already. It's not like you have to pay such rapt attention because you've never heard the songs before. You know what they are, so you can kind of you're in that world of the songs being performed, or in the world of the story being told. And yeah, so I saw kind of similarities like that. I don't think I ever successfully kind of realized that idea. I wanted to do that with a musical I did about Imelda Marcos, where I set it in a disco. And in my early conception, I wanted the audience to be able to wander in and out as they would at a club. That they could go into a chill out room. They could go out and get a drink. They could do that, but the show just would keep going on, and it was being told through songs. the show happened, but it didn't happen in that way, which is probably good, because like the shadow plays, it would have been a very long show.
Yeah. You mentioned there you were aware of gamelan music, that beautiful Indonesian instruments, before you came to Bali. And the key thing about that is the fact that it uses quarter tones, the spaces between intervals on the Western scale. So it sounds so completely different. That shimmering effect that a gamelan can have. What effect did that have on you, hearing the possibilities in a musical instrument that can sort of play between the spaces of traditional of Western music?
That was a real puzzle for me. The scales were a real puzzle for me. Parts of them felt incredibly natural and intuitive, and then parts of it felt that they made me ask how instinctive is our sense of notes and tuning. We tend to think it's probably, I'm going to guess lots of cultures do, that our way of music is kind of a natural, intuitive, almost instinctive expression that's built into us as a human being, as an animal. And yet then we hear somebody else's music that has a completely different system, and you go, well, I guess there's other ways of doing this. It kind of opens up your thinking, and you go, you don't think that what you're doing is maybe quite so special. Yes, I remember I bought a lot of gamelan cassettes, because that's how you could get the music at that time, on cassettes. And I have to say, the rhythms, the counterpoint, there's always like different players playing counterpoint to others. It really rocks out. The kind of the Indonesian version is a lot more tranquil. The Balinese version is kind of, it is rocking.
Yeah. It's like a storm, actually. That's what it feels like to listen to it sometimes.
Uh-huh.
You're making you made the show American Utopia at a really dark time in world history, particularly in American history. Why Utopia? That's an interesting word to use at a time like now.
Yeah, it was a kind of a bold thing to do, because I didn't want people to think that I was proclaiming that we were living in an ideal society. Obviously, we're not. That should be obvious to anyone. But I wanted to kind of throw out the idea of, well, let's ask ourselves, what would that be? What would that be? And do we have? We may never achieve that. That's probably very unlikely. But how? What possibilities do we have to kind of live together that might be a little bit better than what we're experiencing at the moment? And so the show, part of what the show does is it attempts to kind of show an audience, give them evidence of a little bit of what's possible.
So the utopia is what's on stage then? That's what you're showing us, a kind of utopia?
In a way. We don't say that. We never say that. That would be a bit much of a claim. But you see evidence of it. You see people kind of playing together, people of many different races, sexual orientations, etc., all kind of working together in harmony and having a wonderful time and producing something together that they could never do by themselves. They can only do that they can only produce this kind of joyous music by working together. And not only are they kind of making music that way, they're moving around as they're doing it. Yeah. And so the movement is also part of that. That's something that is a kind of communal, ecstatic experience.
To me, the genius move is to pulling apart the drum kit, taking apart the drum kit and giving its components to different people so they can walk around on stage. And as you see that happen, you remember that the drum kit was actually invented from a marching band, and it was like have a one-man band effect to pull all these components together. So pulling them apart again and giving them to different people in the group playing on stage. What happens when you do that?
Wow. Yeah, as you said, the drum kit didn't always exist. It was kind of a labor-saving device. Before that, the various duties of to play the different parts of the drum kit would be assigned to different players, and they still are in, say, a marching band or a second line group in New Orleans or samba schools in Brazil. I think, going back to what I was saying, I think when you divide the duties amongst these different people, you have this visceral sensation of of them all working together to make something harmonious. So the groove comes from them kind of playing really in sync. I mean, these players are great, and when they play in sync, it sounds like it could be one drummer, but you see and you sense that it's coming from 6 of them. And there's a very different feeling that you get from that. It doesn't feel like an individual expression. It feels like a communal group expression. And that's what you're witnessing. So it has, it's really, I think, conveys a different thing to an audience.
You've also liberated the drummer. I was a drummer for many years, and you sit at the back of the band. Maybe you get a riser to put your drum kit on top of that. And now these guys, they're these drummers. They're free. They're walking around. And there's a lovely moment when they're all facing each other, all the different drummers, and they're looking at each other and really, really enjoying the groove they're making and this rolling, thundering sort of sound that's being created, all this. They must be terribly grateful to David for giving him an upfront role in the group.
I think, yes, there was a moment early in rehearsals where some of the drummers were like, I don't know if we signed on for this. I don't know, having to move and do this at the same time. I mean, I'm a drummer, but now you want me to move around with it and carry it and kind of strain my back. I said, wait and see. They'll
put it on your epitaph. They'll say, David Byrne, he was kind to drummers. Yes. They'll do that.
Yes. So the minute we did it in front of an audience, in our kind of test rehearsals and whatever, it became so evident that now the drummers, the people who are usually stuck in the back, could sometimes be the star. They could be in the front, and everybody loved it when they came to the front.
Both American Utopia and that other great concert film you made with Jonathan Demme way back when, Stop Making Sense, both of them sound quite joyous, very joyous. And I'm wondering, given the number of albums you've made over the years where you've recorded them as a band together in the same room, if you're rebelling against that whole idea of the studio album, the traditional way that was recorded, where you strip it all back, everyone records their piece one at a time with headphones on, and then it's sort of layered on top, and then the producer tweaks with that. Are you in a kind of a long battle with that approach to recording music, David, I wonder?
No, I would say that that has its uses as well. And that's can be a useful way of writing in the studio, or writing in your home studio, or with your laptop or something like that. You can kind of assemble things piecemeal like that, and it can be very useful, because then you can take out the middle once you don't need it anymore, whatever it might be. You can kind of reassemble things and all that. So it's very useful that way. But but to me, nothing beats performing on stage. That has a really different feeling. There's another energy that comes in.
Another tone as well, and a different kind of aesthetic that comes with that.
Yeah, I think some of the some of the things that are kind of implied in the music and the recorded versions, they really become manifest when you do it live. Whether it's that it makes you want to dance, or whether has this kind of a trance-like, ecstatic aspect to it, all those things really become manifest when you start doing it live. Where I don't know how things are there in Sydney or in Bali, but here that is all stopped for the moment.
I remember I haven't been able to see American Utopia in the cinema, of course, but I did see Stop Making Sense in the cinema. And the weird thing about watching that is you can watch the movie of that and everyone in the audience is dancing, but we're sitting down in the cinema. No one's dancing in the cinema. What's wrong with us, David? Isn't that strange when you think about it?
Yeah, it is. Well, it is. Maybe there's a little restriction there, fire codes or something like that. But there are. So I have seen people dance in the cinemas. Yeah, I've seen it happen. It's usually towards the end.
Your family migrated to North America from Scotland. Was there Scottish folk music in your house?
There was, not a lot, but there was some. I remember a singer, Jean Redpath. My folks had some records of hers. She sang fairly traditional songs in a very kind of clear bell-like voice. I think there was a record maybe of Byrne's songs or something like that. But there was also, there was other things. I think my parents maybe liked Mozart. There was probably Pete Seeger, the U.S. folk singer, those kinds of things. And I think at some point, you have to imagine the period that it was. The pop music records of that time, this was probably before the Beatles, when I was really young. The pop music was like these Broadway musical soundtracks. So it'd be Sound of Music or My Fair Lady or something like that. And those were the big pop records at that specific period, which is kind of strange to imagine now.
Do you remember the first music you started to listen to where, you know, that feeling when you really, really encounter music for the first time? It normally happens when, I don't know, I suppose you're 10 years old or something. And it seems like magic to you. It seems like, how was this thing ever made? And this is affecting me so profoundly. And I'm really loving it. And there's that element of magic to it. It seems like this thing that's popped into the world fully formed. Do you remember having that experience?
I do. I remember hearing on a little tiny radio a group called the Byrds. And it was probably their version of Bob Dylan's song, Mr. Tambourine Man. And I'd never heard anything like it. Just sonically, I thought, this is nothing like anything I've ever heard before. It may have even occurred to me that I thought, the way the guitar sounds, it's like a gamelan. It's very kind of chimey and bell-like. And it made me think, there's another world out there. Somehow this music is speaking to me, and it's telling me that there's other people out there that are different than what I'm seeing around me. There's another whole world of music and culture and whatever that I'm not seeing in the little town where I lived. And
like
I need
a radio broadcast from a distant planet, and you think,
yes, and you go, yes, but I need to go there. I need to go there and see that. Yeah.
Your dad was an engineer. Do you like finding out how things work? Do you have that kind of that kind of intellect that wants to actually open up a car or something, or a bridge and understand how things work?
Yeah, I don't actually open up a car or can tinker with a bridge, but but I am kind of very curious how things work. And I like when I'm presented with a problem or something, my initial reaction is to say, let's break it down and kind of into all the little parts and analyze those. And it might become clearer. The answer might present itself if we can kind of dismantle this problem. So it's kind of treating lots of things as if it's a car engine. And if you can take it apart and see how it works, the answer to whatever problem it is might present itself right in front of your eyes.
Yeah, that's what I'm really struck by your book. You know how music works. It's wonderful. It explains so much of how things. It feels like, I don't know, if you could draw diagrams of how the music industry work, you'd sort of look at this kind of exploded diagram of music and how it works and how the industry works. It feels like that kind of an opening up, a dissection, a keen exploration of that world that you've lived in for so long.
Thank you. Yeah, I was struck by the fact that music is affected by all these non-musical contexts that it finds itself in, whether it might be the technology of recording, the business of music, the acoustics of where it's performed, all these things. I think I realized those things are helping shape what you hear. They're not given credit as being creators, but they are shaping it just as much as the creator does.
Like I said, you were born in Scotland and had your early years there. Why did your parents want to leave? You know, Glasgow or Scotland might not have been the most fabulous place in the world in that time, but what made them want to leave and migrate to North America?
At first, I was told, and I think rightly so, that there was no work. The shipyards had closed down. The steel foundries had pretty much closed down. So an industrial city like Glasgow, that's where my parents were from, was kind of fallen on hard times. And I think my dad had some training, so he got hired by an American company, which is what was happening at that time. But later on, much later, when I was a grown up, and they would tell me about how they, you know, as parents do, they would tell me about how they met, the different aspects of their family. And I realized that they were from what was called there a mixed marriage. One side of the family was Protestant and the other side of the family is Catholic. And that was just, it seemed inconceivable to me. But then I could tell when I, would go back to Scotland or other places, you'd realize this is serious. This was taken really seriously there. This is not a trivial matter. The members of their family refused to speak to them when they married someone from the other side. And I thought, that's got to be pretty hard as well, to kind of to be severed from parts of your family or parts of your husband or your wife's family because of something like this. To suddenly be kind of outcasts in your own town, amongst your own people. And I thought, I'll bet that drove them out as well. They just thought, we have to get away from this.
It was like that here too. And my parents were mixed marriage as well, Catholic Protestant marriage, and that was a big deal. But it all ended almost overnight as soon as the country became multicultural, as soon as people from all over the world started coming to Australia, and particularly from Asia. That was it. And now it's not remembered here, but it was a big thing right up until the 1970s that there was this kind of weird segregation between Catholics and Protestants. It was the oddest thing in the world, and it seems bizarre and eccentric to Australians today.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering, if only for the fact that we can make note of how much we change and how much change is possible and how things that to us now seem kind of preposterous then were very, very serious.
So there you are with your family from Scotland. You arrive in Canada first, then Baltimore in the United States. I wonder if you think your experience as a boy with a funny accent, because Glaswegian's hard for a lot of people to understand, even in Britain. Has that given you and left you with the sense of being an outsider looking in to America?
Yes. Yes, I had an accent, as did my parents for their whole lives. My friends couldn't understand my parents at all. They would say, "What language are they speaking?" And of course, my parents would say, "We speak English better than you do." And uh, as a child, I think it's pretty much as soon as I got into school, so I would be 6 or 7 years old, I started losing my accent really quickly. I mean, that's what happens with kids of immigrants like that. They want to blend in. They want to be like the other kids. And so I did my best to do that in my way. But then you go home and you realize that some parts of your family are different than what the other kids do. The way you hold a knife and fork are different than what the other kids do, at least in the States. Sometimes the kind of food you eat is not the same as what Billy eats across the street. And you realize, so it gives you this feeling of straddling two worlds. And for me, I felt like it gave me it gave me the ability to kind of zoom out and kind of look at, say, America and go, oh, this is what Americans do. This is what we do in my family, and this is what Americans do. Americans like to go to malls. Okay, so I should go to malls too.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of inside and outside at the same time.
Yeah, like I think one of the most, Talking Heads was very popular. They're a very popular band in Australia, and I think part of it is because you came to us as like an anthropologist living amongst Americans. Like you're going, I live with Americans. They're interesting people. They do these things. They drive in cars. They go to the mall. Because Australians are a lot like Americans, but the 10% that's different is really different. And so, yes, they are interesting, aren't they? They're quite strong. They do these things. I think that's part of the appeal you have outside the United States. We kind of get your role as this fascinated anthropologist of your own people, David.
Oh, okay. I'm glad that's been useful.
You formed Talking Heads in the 1970s, and you worked with Brian Eno. When you're in a band, it's like a marriage, I think. You're sort of you're harnessed to each other for quite a while. And then you collaborate once you have a solo career, and that's more promiscuous, I think. What do you like? What kind of collaboration do you like? Do you like the free love version, the promiscuous version, where you can work on a project together for a while and then go see it, or that creative marriage where you're harnessed to other people under the rubric of this project? What do you tend to prefer, Dave?
Wow. I think for me it worked out really well, and it seems to be a pattern that a lot of musicians and other kinds of artists follow. When you have your little tribe of like 4 people in a band or 5 people or whatever it might be, that's really a great way to survive and kind of have a support system, camaraderie. You can all go out for a drink together, and then you can go back and make some music, and it's just a wonderful experience. And but kind of up to a point. and then it's sometimes, I mean, even it depends on the band. Some find a way to negotiate the fact that after a certain point they want to have a little bit more of a life of their own, and like, I don't want to every night do things with you all. Yeah. It's I have some friends of my own, You're not the only friends I have.
You look at the Rolling Stones and go, how do you do this? How are you still doing this after all these years, hanging out with those same dudes?
Yes, it's kind of amazing. Yeah. Them and they and there a handful of others that seem to have managed to do that, have managed to kind of have lives of their own and then come together and do the music that they do. But yes, so as often happens, my interest took me a little bit outside of what the little tribe was doing. And eventually I had to kind of go and explore all that and see how that was, see what that was about.
There's an element of surrender and trust when you collaborate, isn't there? I mean, you have to say, I'm going to surrender a bit of control in return for what you bring to this. And you have to manage that, don't you? You have to manage as a kind of a restraint that has to be balanced with enthusiasm and affection, I suppose, and all those things.
Yes. And you have to take what the other person's offering seriously and assume that their intent is genuine. That they're not just throwing something at you that is, some whatever, not seriously thought out thing just to see what you think. Yes, if you're going to give it serious consideration, you want to feel like they really mean it, and then you can trust them. And yeah, it can really work out. You can sometimes end up somewhere with something that you would have never done on your own. And it takes you to somewhere completely new. You get to see how someone else works. I mean, and there's other times when it doesn't work at all. I've done some collaborations where it
fell in a heap.
Yeah, they've kind of fell in a heap, or there was some sort of misdirection or confusion or miscommunication at some point. And I'm not saying it ended with shouting and lawsuits, but creatively it didn't have the same kind of result.
That's a good name for a band, I think. Shouting and Lawsuits. I think that's a fun name. I was reading the way you were talking about, just going to the songwriting process again here. In your book, you talk about how with some of the work you've made, you've put down all the music first. You put it all down based on sort of riffs and that turn into loops that then get layered, and you create this kind of fabulous sound. And then with that, you start singing a melody into that. And then you write the lyrics for that. I'm really interested in that. Is that an intuitive process, composing lyrics into that melody that's sort of arisen out of this layered bit of music? Or have you consciously already got a bunch of ideas lined up already? Or did the lyrics just seem to sort of pop out of the song? It's an odd question, but is the song telling you what it wants to be and what it wants to sound like and what the words are meant to be?
A little bit of all of the above. There are sometimes, yes, where I'm kind of improvising vocal lines over top of existing music, and sometimes it'll be pure nonsense, or sometimes just kind of scat singing, kind of just singing syllables and finding kind of a rhythm for the syllables and a melody, and then I'll come back later and I'll go, I need to find some words that fit this. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes if I do that, I tend to find words that seem to be saying something. The words that seem to work with that melody and that rhythm, they seem to be saying something. Something kind of is, as you say, kind of revealing itself, and like it wants to say something. It has something to say, or the secret concern that you have that you're not even aware of makes itself apparent. There's other times where, like I think, like on my last record, I had lots of lyric ideas written down already, and then the music was on the other side, and so I would kind of put up one of the music tracks and start improvising some of the lyrics that were already written, and just trying melodies and trying them against a particular track, and I'd very quickly find out, no, that lyric does not work with that track. Let's try another one. Throw that paper aside and grab another sheet of paper. And sometimes I would find something that really seemed to organically fit. So I discovered Brian Eno was very encouraging in this respect, because I had tended to write songs in, I guess, in a more conventional way, where you sit with a guitar and you kind of get through it and go, well, here's a verse idea and here's a lyric for that, and now we have to do a chorus or whatever. He was very encouraging and going, oh, there's all sorts of ways you can do this. And sometimes in the end result, you get to, by if you use an unconventional means, sometimes you get something really surprising as a result.
Yeah, that was my next question. Have you ever written something down as a lyric and gone, wow, where the hell did that come from?
Oh yeah, I've done that. I still do that. And I've got somewhere where I look at it and go, I don't think I can sing that.
Oh, I wish you would.
No.
Liz Gilbert tells a story about Tom Waits. Tom Waits told her apparently that one day he was getting an idea for a song while he was driving on a freeway in Los Angeles. And he turned and said, do you mind? Like, I'm driving a car right now. I'm not in the studio. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to give me, but can you just wait until I arrive and can get into a house or into a studio so I can actually, bring you into this world. But please don't do this to me while I'm driving the car. Does that make any sense to you? Do you that idea of a kind of a muse that's taken so seriously? It's a very Tom Waitsian story, I know, but does that does that make sense to you? The way where you have to attend to your muse, you have to have a conversation with that creative voice that's popping along and giving you stuff at sometimes at appropriate or inappropriate.
I agree with that, and you can't just like sit back and go, okay, I'll wait for it to come. You have to work at being receptive. You have to keep the kind of creative muscles going, even if sometimes what comes out is kind of crap. But that keeps it open and attuned to when the good stuff comes. But like Tom Waits, I've traveled in a car where I'll carry like a little tiny tape recorder, one of those little, pocket tape recorders, where basically you just have to push one button, and I could kind of either, if it's a lyric, I could say it. If it was a little melodic line, I could do that as I was driving and without having to fiddle with. Now, if you did it, you'd have to like fiddle with your phone and find the recording app and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, by then you've crashed.
David Byrne died in a blazing car accident on a freeway yesterday while trying to get his iPhone to record an idea. That wouldn't be good. No.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Yeah, it's I wanted to. You strike me as I mentioned the Rolling Stones. You're not like the Rolling Stones who keep doing the same, plugging away at the same thing year after year after year, and that seems to make them happy, I suppose. I get a sense with you, you're even now after all these decades, you're still delighted by things. You're still discovering new things. Is that hard? Are you constantly telling yourself, now come on, don't get stuck in a rut. Go and look at this stuff. Listen to what's happening elsewhere. See what is happening in the world. How are you keeping yourself so fresh and delighted by new ideas, David?
Well, probably because I've discovered that putting yourself into some places that's unfamiliar, that whether it's a physically new place or a mentally new place or trying a different technique or whatever it might be. Yes, you end up somewhere different and as a result. And you end up going, oh, look what I did, or look what I discovered, or look what I realized now that I didn't know. And it happened because I was open to kind of this new experience. It doesn't always work. And sometimes it's very difficult to convince other people to come along. During the pandemic, I've been sometimes gathering friends and bandmates and whatever, and going, oh, let's go for bike rides and explore New York. And New York is huge, and so I'll go, oh, let's check out different neighborhoods that we ourselves haven't been to. Like, let's go to Jackson Heights. It's the most diverse neighborhood in the world. Let's go there and see what's happening there. If people are out, or if the shops are all shut. Let's go to another area. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to convince people to do that. He goes, "You want to go there? You want to go what? What? You want to go there? Really?" And I go, no, I want to see with my own eyes what it's like. And I might return a kind of changed person. And sometimes I do. Sometimes that happens. And the same things happens with other things. If I go to see some music or whatever, I'll go to see some music or films or whatever like that are maybe a bit of a fringe thing. And of course, for me, it's always a learning experience. Sometimes I don't learn very much, but sometimes I go, oh, that's a way of doing something that I would never, ever would have thought of myself. And that, file that away. That might be of use to me at some point.
I think taking that attitude to the world is the best, well, anyway, for me, it's the best defense against depression. Do you find that?
Yeah. I don't get very depressed, so maybe that's proof of what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, during the pandemic, yes, there have been mornings where I wake up and I kind of I'll glance over at my schedule or whatever and think, okay, here's what I'm doing today. But why? Why am I doing anything? What's it all for? But we get up and soldier on and kind of we're moving along.
You've started this, what would you call it? It's a website, it's a news service called Reasons to be Cheerful, where you've been singling out good news stories, practical good news stories. Why do you think there is a need from that? Apart from the idea that it's uplifting to read such stories at the moment, do you think where people there's something about the human condition that makes us more naturally inclined to pay more attention to bad news rather than good news?
Yeah, that's. I think that's pretty indisputable. That our nature is to pay more attention to kind of scary stuff, bad news, dangerous things that might threaten us. That's just it's a survival mechanism, kind of a holdover from whatever we were tens of thousands of years ago. And in some ways, I guess it serves us well of survival. You want to be very much alert to something that might come and kill you. And things that are merely helpful, you kind of remember those, but you're not kind of on high alert for those. So in a way, yes, with the internet and everything else, it's just the barrage of stuff that preys on that part of our human nature is just overwhelming. And the fact that various websites and social media and this and that and the other, they've learned that this is a way to capture our attention. To kind of, if we put scary things out there or bad news, they'll get our attention more than if they tell us kind of hopeful things that are happening. But I thought, okay, for my own sanity and peace of mind, I have to kind of do some self-therapy and see if I can kind of buck this trend and kind of inoculate myself from some of this. And I started doing that. And then I thought, let's see if I can formalize this and have some collaborators, and we can actually make this an official thing, an ongoing thing. And so, well, that's what we're doing. I think it's part of me is surprised that we're continuing to find stuff.
Yeah. Have you had to push hard? Have you had to push hard to find these hopeful stories?
My collaborators are really good at it. I don't think I'm anywhere near as good. The things that I find are kind of fewer and far between, but I still find them. I still find something and I go, oh, I didn't know about that. That's, I'm going to have to dig into that deeper and see if I can report that, make sure, validate it, fact check it, et cetera, all that kind of thing.
Do you think this is a different kind of journalism? I mean, most journalism is predicated on the ethics of skepticism, which is healthy, of course, but sometimes so much of the language of journalism about any kind of proposal is framed in the language of, oh, this won't work, or it can't work, or what's wrong with this, and And I suppose that's rigorous. So are you looking at creating a different kind of journalism, like a solutions-based journalism here?
Yeah, it does kind of fall under a genre called solutions journalism, which exists. We hope that ours has a slightly looser kind of tone than some of the others out there. But yes, there is a whole genre called solutions journalism, and I suppose we're part of that. And it's fun. Yes, we keep finding things.
You are kicking back against quite a pessimistic mood that's in the world at the moment, or certainly our part of the world and your part of the world. Do you remember a similar feeling of widespread hopelessness during like that period when the Cold War escalated again in the early 1980s, when I certainly felt it myself. I didn't think I was going to live to see the age of 30. I thought nuclear war was inevitable. There was no way out of the kind of stalemate of the Cold War, and we're all going to die. I remember feeling that quite strongly in the early 1980s. Did you feel that sense of hopelessness at that time as well?
I did too. Yes, I felt that we were really close to being on the brink of threatening to use these weapons that could destroy us all. I remember it when I was a child in the late 60s, when it was called the Cuban Missile Crisis, where there was this kind of standoff between the United States and Russia, and that just all continued. It was just this kind of basic background level of fear and kind of terror that was kind of always there, which actually spurred a lot of innovation and invention and economies and this and that. But it was also a really debilitating and sad way to live.
Given the kind of journalism you've been doing with Reasons to be Cheerful, are you seeing the ways in which cities are changing under the global pandemic?
Yes. There was a period here in New York where rents are notoriously high. They're not that low in Sydney either, but people were leaving in droves to play either to another city where they could have a little more space, a larger apartment, maybe a yard or something like that. Sometimes they would leave for the outskirts of the city. I have friends, and my daughters and her friends, a lot of them did that. And now the rents in the city have started dropping probably because so many people left, that now those artists and musicians are returning. And they're going, oh, now I can get that apartment that I always wanted. So there's no, I don't think the cities are going to end in that way, but yes, there was some change, and who knows, it might, some of the artists and musicians that have been driven out of certain neighborhoods, priced out, they might get to come back and push against that trend that's been happening for decades.
One can only hope. It's been like that in Sydney, and particularly a city that once had one of the most thriving music scenes in the world. It's all been lost because of the high cost of real estate, the high cost of rents. It's just driven creative people out. It's a terrible thing. But I also know you're a keen cyclist. And are you seeing cities now becoming more friendly to pedestrians and bikes now that they've been empty, the streets have been emptied out during lockdown periods? And
absolutely.
given a kind of a pause, a time to rethink the way that such cities might work.
Absolutely. It was a trend that was already happening. Cities becoming a more accommodating to cyclists, to different kinds of transportation were being considered in different places. And then the pandemic really kind of kicked it into high gear, where the bike shops that remained open here in New York were all of a sudden completely sold out. People didn't want to ride the subway and touch all these poles and chairs and handrails that other people had touched. so they said, okay, I'll get a bike. And so suddenly, suddenly the city is filled with cyclists. And as in many other places like Paris and London and lots of other places, this probably more so in those places, they lay down kind of additional kind of bike lanes and, very, very quickly. I mean, all it takes is some paint and a little kind of thing to make a straight line, and you've got a bike lane. And they started doing that in other places as well. And some of them will maybe get removed once this is over, but a lot of people have gotten used to it and they find it very enjoyable. And I think to some extent, some of that's going to stay. The fact that people enjoy commuting or getting around on their own power that way. I find it really enjoyable.
I have a view that I think by temperament, people are either optimistic or pessimistic. And I don't mean cynical by pessimistic. I mean pessimistic. You're sort of ready for the bad outcome. But by nature, I'm optimistic, but my wife, she's quite pessimistic. I just think that that's a question of temperament, but she just thinks I'm wrong. That's her attitude, David. I'm wrong. Where do you sit on that spectrum? And do you think people can afford cynicism these days? What do you think about all that?
I tend to be optimistic by temperament, but often I'll read things in the paper. I'll read the news, and I'll go, well, I might be an optimist by temperament, but this looks like it's really going to hell. And so it's a bit difficult. So how do you, with her, how do you resolve things? If you say, oh, let's build this, or let's do this, it's going to be wonderful, and she'll go, oh no, it's all going to collapse tomorrow.
Through intense mockery of each other's attitudes. That's how we do it. It's like, it's all going to go to hell. It's easy to mock that, but then it's easy for her to mock my Pollyanna-ish attitude towards the world. So intense mockery is the way we get through that, David.
Okay, all right, that's the technique.
David, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for being so forthcoming, and really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Kembali 20 has been made possible with the support of the Yayasan Mudra Swari Saraswati patron program and their donors. And the patron program was created to seek assistance for the survival of both festivals and the foundation. And by making a valuable contribution to the Yayasan patron program, you will be directly involved in delivering both festivals in due time. Your contribution will guarantee the future of Indonesia's most meaningful cross-cultural platform of words and ideas and culture and the creative arts. You can follow the Ubud Writers Festival on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or visit ubudwritersfestival.com for more information about the patron program. Thank you very much. I'm Richard Feidler, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much.